stories fade with time, buried beneath silence, lost in forgotten files, or dismissed as mysteries that will never be solved. But behind every case is a voice that was never heard, a truth still waiting in the dark. This channel is dedicated to the victims, the unanswered questions, and the stories that refuse to disappear. Because somewhere, someone still knows what happened. Welcome to Cries Unheard in the Darkness. On July 30th, 1975, a man who once held the power to stop the American economy in its tracks walked out of a Detroit establishment and simply vanished. Jimmy Hoffa wasn't just a union boss. He was a force of nature. To the millions of truck drivers he represented, he was a hero who helped bring them into the middle class. To the U.S. government, he was a dangerous criminal. And to the Mafia, he was a partner who eventually became a liability. But before the headlines, the trials, and the Mafia hits, there was a boy from Brazil, Indiana, once nicknamed the Tumor. James Riddle Hoffa entered the world on Valentine's Day, 1913, under bizarre circumstances. The delivering doctor originally thought his mother had a tumor in her abdomen. When a healthy baby boy appeared instead, the nickname, the Tumor, stuck for years. Life was hard and short on mercy. Jimmy's father died of lung disease when he was only 7. By 1924, his mother moved the family to Detroit. Hoffa left school at 14. He traded books for boxes, taking on manual labor to support his family. It was here, amidst substandard wages and abusive shift foremen, that the activist was born. In 1932, after a final confrontation with a foreman, Hoffa quit. But he didn't just walk away. He began to organize. His specialty was the sales pitch. Between 1933 and 1935, he would pull up alongside sleeping truck drivers, wake them up, and convince them they deserved a better life. Hoffa's rise was a masterclass in momentum. In 1936, he met Josephine Postsiwak on a picket line. He later described the moment as feeling like he'd been hit in the chest with a blackjack. In 1946, he became president of Local 299 in Detroit. In 1957, he became president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. But this growth wasn't just built on charismatic speeches. It was built on muscle. To unify the unions, Hoffa made accommodations with gangsters. It was a deal with the devil that helped the Teamsters grow from 75,000 members to over 2 million. By the late 1950s, Hoffa was the most powerful labor leader in history. But he had a habit of making the wrong enemies. In 1960, he broke union tradition by endorsing Richard Nixon over John F. Kennedy. When JFK won, he appointed his brother Robert Kennedy as Attorney General. Bobby Kennedy was obsessed with Hoffa. He formed the Get Hoffa Squad, an elite group of prosecutors dedicated to one goal: putting Jimmy behind bars. The pressure was relentless. During a 1962 hearing, a man named Warren Swanson fired a pellet gun at Hoffa in the courtroom. Hoffa didn't flinch. He punched the man and knocked him down. He famously told reporters, "You always run away from a man with a knife and toward a man with a gun." What was it like in the inner circle? Marvin Elkind, a driver assigned to Hoffa by gangster Anthony Salerno, described him as tremendously intimidating. This man had no fear at all, showed very little emotion, had completely no sense of humor. You become a piece of the car, just like an extra gear shift, and they talk. In 1967, the government finally won. Hoffa was sentenced to 13 years for jury tampering and fraud. Before entering prison, he handpicked a loyalist, Frank Fitzsimmons, to act as caretaker president. Hoffa thought Fitzsimmons would be a puppet. He was wrong. Fitzsimmons liked the power, and more importantly, the Mafia liked Fitzsimmons. He was easier to deal with. Inside the walls of Lewisburg, Hoffa's temper flared. He entered into a bitter feud with fellow inmate Anthony Tony Provenzano, a Capwargime in the Genovese family. Provenzano reportedly threatened to pull out Hoffa's guts. It was a grudge that would never heal. In 1971, President Nixon commuted Hoffa's sentence on one condition: He was barred from union activity until 1980. Hoffa was desperate to get back in. He spent the early 70s fighting the ban, unaware that the world had moved on. On July 30th, 1975, Hoffa believed he was heading to a peace meeting with Tony Pro and Detroit Mafia kingpin Anthony Giacalone. He wrote the meeting in his office calendar as TG 2 p.m. Red Fox. He arrived on time, but his associates didn't. At 2:15 p.m., an annoyed Hoffa called his wife from a payphone. "I'll be home by 4 to grill steaks," he told her. He was last seen walking around the parking lot. Around 2:45 p.m., witnesses saw him get into the back of a maroon Mercury. He was never seen again. The car belonged to Giacalone's son, but it was driven that day by Chucky O'Brien, Hoffa's foster son. In 2001, DNA testing matched a hair from the back seat to Hoffa. The FBI's internal Hoffa's memo later concluded that Hoffa was murdered because his return to power threatened the Mafia's control of the Teamsters' pension fund. In the absence of a body, confessions emerged. Frank, the Irishman, Sheeran claimed he shot Hoffa in a Detroit house. Richard, the Iceman Kuklinski, claimed he was part of a kidnap team. While Sheeran's story became a Hollywood epic, many FBI agents dismissed both as hoaxes. The search for Jimmy Hoffa became a decades-long scavenger hunt. In 2010, a demolition at Giants Stadium found nothing. In 2006, a $250,000 dig at a horse farm found nothing. In 2022, a survey for a body in a steel drum at a New Jersey landfill came back with nothing. Former Mafia capo Michael Franzi's remains cryptic, claiming the location is wet and deep, and that the shooter is still alive in prison. To some, Jimmy Hoffa was a latter-day Al Capone. To others, he was the man who gave the American worker a voice. In 1989, the FBI agent in charge of the Detroit office admitted, "I'm comfortable I know who did it, but it's never going to be prosecuted because we would have to divulge informants." The truth remains locked in a silent vault of Mafia secrets. Jimmy Hoffa spent his life making sure America moved. In the end, he became the only thing that stayed perfectly still. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact the FBI Detroit Field Office. Thanks for listening to Cries, Unheard in the Darkness. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Like and subscribe, because the darkness always has more to say. Until next time, listen carefully.